Today in our 2014 Chevrolet Silverado 1500, we'll be having a look at and installing the Airlift LoadLifter 5000 air helper springs for the rear axle, part number AL57204. Here's what our airbags look like installed. These airbags will operate between 5 minimum PSI and 100 maximum PSI. They offer up to 5,000 pounds of load leveling support. So what that means is if you were towing a trailer, like a gooseneck or a fifth wheel, and you had a 5,000 pound pin weight, this will maintain your vehicle's ride height up to that amount of weight. Also, if you have a heavy load in the bed of your truck, like hauling a load of rocks or gravel, you can maintain your factory ride height with that amount of weight. It's important to note that these airbags don't give you an additional 5,000 pounds of load carrying capacity. They will only support up to 5,000 pounds on your truck. You'll never want to exceed your vehicle's gross vehicle weight rating. What sets these airbags apart from other options on the market is that these are compatible with fifth wheel and gooseneck trailer hitches. You don't have to do any modification to the attachment points for your gooseneck or your fifth wheel. These have alternate installation instructions and hardware included with the kit, so you can use it with or without gooseneck or fifth wheel hitches. Some other airbag systems in the market, you can't do that. All right, the first thing we want to do is determine what our factory ride height is on our truck with no weight in the bed or no heavy trailer attached. We'll start in the rear. We'll measure through the center of the tire on up to the top of the wheel well, and we're about 38.5 inches. So we'll record that measurement and we'll get the same one at the front. Okay, in the front, we're about at 36 inches. Now the reason we're getting the measurements at the front is because when we have weight in the back of the truck, the back end will go down and the front end will rise up. When your front end rises up, your headlight angle changes. So instead of your headlights pointing directly ahead of you at the road, they're now pointing up towards the trees and could potentially blind oncoming drivers at night. Also, instead of your tires being straight up and down and having a full contact patch on the ground, you get what is called positive camber, which is the tires leaning out like this. And what that causes is more edge wear on the outer part of your tire. You have less traction, less grip, less steering and stability. And by having the weight off of your front tires, you don't have as much braking ability in the front of your vehicle, and your front brakes are what do most of your braking. Okay, now we have about 900 pounds of weight in the back of our truck, and this is to simulate towing a heavy trailer or having a heavy load in the bed. Okay, so in the rear, we're right at 36 inches. So that means the back of the truck has come down about 2.5 inches. We'll double check the front and see where that's at. Okay, at the front, we're about 36.5 inches. So the front end of the truck has come up about 1/2 inch, or the back has came down about 2.5 inches. All right, now that we have our airbags installed, we have the weight replaced back in the bed of our truck, and we'll double check our measurements and see where they compare to the factory ride height. Okay, we're back at 38.5 inches, so that means we're at factory ride height again, even with a substantial amount of weight in the bed of our truck. Now here at the front, we're back at 36 inches, which was factory ride height. So now that we've maintained our ride height, our truck's no longer doing this. It's back to being level and maintaining our factory ride height, which allows our vehicle suspension to work properly and give us the handling and the safety that we're looking for when we're towing a heavy load or we're hauling a lot of materials in the bed of our truck. And now we'll take the truck out on our test course. On the left side of the screen, you'll see what it's like without the airbags installed. As we go around corners and do evasive maneuvering, you'll notice how much body roll there is and how much lack of stability we have doing these maneuvers. As we go over the bumps, you can see our suspension bottom out, and you can see that we don't have the travel that we need to absorb these bumps, providing a rough ride and lack of stability, handling, and braking ability. On the right side of the screen, you'll see what it's like with the airbags installed. On our test course, when we go around the corners and do evasive maneuvering, you'll notice that there's a lot less body roll, a lot more stability, and a lot more secure feeling as we're doing these maneuvers. As we go over the bumps, you'll notice the suspension is a lot more settled, there's less jostling going around, And the factory suspension is actually capable of doing its job now, absorbing the bumps and giving us a nice, smooth, and safe ride at the same time. To begin our install, we have our vehicle with all 4 tires on the ground. Now we're taking some of the weight off the rear suspension and raising it up using a pull jack off the hitch. You can use a floor jack, put jack stands on the frame, whatever you need to do in order to get some of the weight off and have your suspension travel be increased. Starting off on our driver's side, there's a few things we need to do. We need to unclip our ABS wire here. Let's use a trim panel tool, and we'll get underneath it and pop out the clip. With it popped off the frame, we use a flathead screwdriver, and we'll open up the clip and take the clip off. We will not be reusing this clip. Then right here where our brake lines and this wiring harness are, we need to unclip this from the frame. Just like that. We have another one for the brake lines right here on top of the frame. We'll pop it off and remove it from the brake lines. We will not be reusing this either. Now in the center of our rear differential, our parking brake cable is secured to it with this bracket. We need to remove this 10mm bolt. Keep the bolt, but we'll take off this bracket. We will not be reusing the bracket either. Okay, now we'll take our large clamp, slide it over our parking brake cable, make sure the hole's facing down, and we'll reinstall the bolt that we removed. We'll want to bend it back slightly in order to get clearance away from our brake lines on the axle. Now we use a 10mm socket on an extension to remove our factory bump stop. Okay, with the bolt removed, we can now use a flathead screwdriver and pry our factory bump stop out of its cup, and we can discard it. All right, now we'll assemble our airbag assembly. It's one of our airbags here. We'll take one of our roll plates, sit it on top, thread in one of our fittings. We'll do it finger tight first, then we'll take a wrench and tighten it 1.5 turns. So there's 1.5. Now we'll take our upper bracket, slide it over the plate and around the fitting, and we'll use our flathead bolts here to secure it into place. Once we have these finger tight, we'll torque them to the amount specified in the instructions using a 7/32 Allen key. Okay, now we'll flip the assembly over. We'll place another roll plate on top of it. This is our lower bracket. There's an arrow. We want this to face away from the fitting, so it'll face towards me, and we'll secure it with our flathead bolts again, and we'll torque those up and down as well. All right, so we're back on our driver's side now. Now this hole here, this is where our ABS wire was clipped to. We're going to take our pull wire, go through that hole, and then it'll come out on the outside of the frame right above it. All right, so here's our pull wire. We'll take our large 3/8 flat washer, stick it on the wire, and we'll drop that inside the frame. Take our 1.5 inch long 3/8 bolt, thread it onto the fish wire, and we'll pull that into the frame and down through the hole. We'll leave the pull wire attached for right now. Okay, now we'll install our airbag assembly into place. On our upper bracket, the side that has only one hole, that'll face towards the rear of the truck. Let's work this in. That. Take our pull wire and we'll feed it through the hole, and we'll pull the bolt down through the hole just like that. Okay, now we'll remove our pull wire. I want to make sure we can try to save it because we'll need it for the other side. As you reach your finger in the frame, you can hold the bolt head still while you remove the wire. Now we'll take our small clamp, slide it over the slot here in our ABS wire, close it back over it, push that up onto our bolt, followed up by a small 3/8 washer, and then one of our lock nuts. And we'll just get this nut finger tight just so it doesn't fall off. Okay. All right, now we'll take our U-bolt, we'll slide it up and over our frame behind all of our brake lines and wires, that way they don't get pinched. And then we'll drop it down into the holes in our upper bracket. All right, now we'll slide a 3/8 flat washer over our U-bolt, and we'll place a lock nut on. Do this on both sides of the U-bolt. We'll begin to snug down our nuts on our U-bolt. Before we have it fully tightened, we want to make sure that the center hole here in our bracket is as close to the center of our frame as possible. We use a 9/16 socket for this. Okay, with them snug down, we'll now torque them to the amount specified in the instructions. Okay, now we have an extra set of hands holding a ratchet that's a 1/4 inch with a 9/16 socket on it inside of the frame to hold our bolt still while we tighten up the nut in the back of our upper bracket. Okay, with that tight, we'll now torque it to the amount specified in the instructions. All right. Okay, now we'll take one of our long bolts and one of our 3/8 washers and one of our clamp brackets here, and we'll slide the short end closest towards the airbag, the long end closest to the rear of the vehicle, go behind our brake line here, have the bolt go through it, and then through our bottom bracket. We'll drop on another flat washer on the bolt, and then a 3/8 nut. And we'll do this same procedure, but mirrored image for the front of the axle, so it'll look like this. Now we'll use a 9/16 wrench and a 9/16 socket and tighten down our clamps. Okay, now we'll torque our bolts to the amount specified in the instructions. We went ahead and repeated the same process to install our passenger side airbag assembly. With both of our airbag assemblies in place now, we can lower the vehicle down fully to have all the weight resting on the rear suspension. Now we need to find a place to mount our inflation valves. In the recessed area here, and step in our bumper, right next to our license plate lights, I made a mark with a paint marker here. This is basically centered in the middle of our license plate light and the distance between that and the front side of our bumper. There's nothing behind here that we have to worry about drilling out. It's the same on both sides. We'll just use a 5/16 drill bit and drill through that mark. We'll do the same for the other side. Okay, now we'll use an airline tubing cutter to cut our airline tubing right in half in the middle, so we have 2 equal length pieces. We have these available on our website as part number AL10530. The reason you want to use one of these is because they ensure a straight cut so you don't get any leaks. see, we have a nice straight cut that didn't crush our tubing. Okay, now we'll take our airline tubing that has our fitting end on it. We'll thread on one of the nuts, place on one of the star washers, and we'll reach behind the bumper and stick it through the hole. Now we'll place on our rubber washer, our flat washer, and then we'll thread on our last nut. Now we'll use a 1/2-inch wrench and we'll hold the nut in place on the backside and a 1/2-inch socket, and we'll just snug down the nut here in the front to hold our fitting securely in place. We'll do the same for the other side. All right, here's how we routed our driver's side line. Here's where it leaves our fitting, goes through our frame, feeds all the way through our box frame here, and comes out the hole right above our airbags. This will protect our airline from any moving parts or sources of heat. Now we'll cut off our excess tubing here, making sure we get a nice straight cut and leave a little bit of slack if we need it. And we'll plug that into our fitting simply by just pushing it in until it stops. Once you push it in fully and it stops, pull back to make sure it's secure, and that'll lock it into place. Our passenger side airline tubing does the same thing basically. Goes around through our frame, through our box section of frame, and out the hole right behind our airbag. Now this side's a little bit different. Once we have it measured out and cut, we'll need to do something else with our line in order to protect it from the heat from our exhaust. We have this heat tubing which will slide over the line and will help better protect it from the heat of our exhaust. And we'll plug it in just like on the other side. Make sure it's secure. Then we'll pull our heat tubing down until it's right next to our fitting. I'm going to put one zip tie on this to secure it to our ABS wire here, and this will keep it even farther away from the exhaust. Okay, now we will fill up our airbags and check for leaks. Now we'll use some soapy water and spray our fittings. We're looking for any large bubbles. Large bubbles will indicate an air leak. Small bubbles are just from the soapy water. Looks like all of our connections are airtight and we have no leaks. And that completes our look at and installation of the Airlift LoadLifter 5000 air helper springs for the rear axle, part number AL57204, on our 2014 Chevrolet Silverado 1500.